Bayer Lobby Tracker. Written by Gary Ruskin. Federal disclosures show Bayer reported spending $9.19 million on lobbying Congress and the executive branch in 2025, which includes fees paid to at least 13 outside lobbying firms. As of the fourth quarter of 2025, 45 lobbyists were registered to lobby for Bayer under the Lobbying Disclosure Act. Here we list the 13 firms registered to lobby for Bayer and the company's in-house lobbyists. Registered lobbyists for Bayer appear in red. In an effort to understand Bayer's influence with the Trump administration, we also reviewed the leadership of Bayer's lobby firms to look for ties to Trump. These are highlighted in yellow. Unless otherwise noted, these firms lobby for Bayer for all of 2025. See our analysis, tracing Bayer's ties to power in Trump's Washington. From lobby firms to top officials, a look at how Bayer built access and secured favors. Ballard Partners. Brian Ballard, founder, key Trump campaign fundraiser, bundler, reportedly raising over $50 million for the 2024 campaign. Served on Trump's 2024 inaugural and transition finance committees. Previously represented the Trump Organization as a Florida lobbyist. His firm employed Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and Attorney General Pam Bondi as partners/lobbyists. Ballard is also registered to lobby for the American Chemistry Council. Daniel McFall, managing partner, served on Trump's 2016 to 2017 presidential transition team. Previously worked as legislative director for Representative Joe Scarborough, RFL, and Chief of Staff for Representative Jeff Miller, RFL, and Representative Matt Gaetz, RFL. McFall is also registered to lobby for the American Chemistry Council. Mike Rubino, partner senior advisor on Trump's 2016 campaign, where he directed operations in 10 states. He was appointed as a senior official at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 2017 in Trump's first term. Hunter Morgan, partner, special assistant to the president, senior advisor for policy and strategy in the first Trump White House. Principal deputy to Peter Navarro and Stephen Miller, policy advisor at the State Department in the Office of Policy and Planning. Previously worked on the Trump 2016 campaign and transition team. In 2020, Trump appointed Morgan to the Presidential Council on Improving Federal Civil Architecture. He was the Trump 2024 campaign's state director for Mississippi and advisor for D.C. outreach. William Russell, partner, special assistant to the president and deputy director of presidential advance and trip director in Trump's first term. He was the aide responsible for Trump's daily travel and logistics for nearly 4 years. He also worked on Trump's 2016 and 2024 campaigns. He worked on Trump's 2016 campaign and was later appointed to USDA as advisor to the Office of the Undersecretary of Farm and Foreign Agriculture Services. Mercury Public Affairs. Registered August 2025. Brian Lenza, partner communications director for the Trump transition team in 2017. Deputy Communications Director for the 2016 Trump-Pence campaign. Lanza has often appeared on cable news shows and has been cited as a senior advisor to the 2024 Trump campaign and transition team. John Lonergan, partner. Political background includes stints on the campaigns of Governor George Pataki, RNY, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee, specializing in research, polling, and messaging. Brian Hughes, partner, NASA Chief of Staff from May to December 2025. Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications at the White House. Senior Advisor and Florida Campaign Director, Trump 2024. Communications Director, Trump-Vance Transition Team. Daniel Alvarez, partner. Senior Advisor for the Trump 2024 campaign and worked on communication strategy for the Trump-Vance Transition Team. During the 2022 midterms, she was Communications Director for the Republican National Committee and served as Communications Director for the Southern Gulf region for Trump's 2020 campaign. Venture Government Strategies. Robert Hobart, partner. Earlier in his career worked as Deputy Chief of Staff, Appropriations Associate Staff, and Legislative Director for 3 Republican members of Congress. Hamilton Bloom, partner. Republican Subcommittee Staff Director and Clerk for the Senate Appropriations Committee on Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies 2019 to 2021. Legislative Assistant to Senate Appropriations Chairman Richard Shelby, R.A.L. Will Brewster, Senior Director, Policy Advisor for Economic Development for Governor Brian Kemp, R.G.A. Legislative Assistant to Senator Richard Shelby, R.A.L. for 5 years. Jonathan Blum, Senior Vice President. He held several senior roles within the U.S. Department of the Treasury during both Trump terms. He was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs, Banking and Finance from 2018 to 2021. He returned to the Treasury in January 2025 as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs and served as Acting Assistant Secretary through much of 2025 before joining Venture in December. Todd Strategy Group. Nicholas Willek, Principal, Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Health and Human Services during the first Trump administration, 2019 to 2021. Professional Staff and Senior Legislative Assistant, House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Health, 2011 to 2019. Ted Lemon, Principal, Former Chief of Staff to Senator Thom Tillis, RNC. Chief Counsel for Nominations and Senior Counsel for then Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Chuck Grassley, RIA. Counsel on the Judiciary Committee for former Ranking Member Senator Jeff Sessions, RAL. Paul Daddle, Principal, Chief Counsel for House Energy and Commerce Committee Health Subcommittee, 2016 to 2018. Assistant to Speaker of the House John Boehner, ROH. Daniel Todd, Principal and Founder, Senior Health Counsel for the Senate Finance Committee, 2011 to 2014. Special Assistant CMS Office of the Administrator, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 2003 to 2005. Eric Berggren, Principal, Chief of Staff for Representative Brett Guthrie, RKY, 2009 to 2021. Chief of Staff and Legislative Director for Representative Ron Lewis, RKY, 2004 to 2008. Catherine Fleming, Associate, Legislative Assistant, Legislative Correspondent and Staff Assistant to Representative Brett Guthrie, RKY, 2016 to 2022. Peter Oppenheim, Principal General Counsel, Senate Health Committee, 2019 to 2021. Trump-appointed Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Education, 2017 to 2019. Education Policy Director and Counsel to the Senate Health Committee, 2013 to 2017. Legislative Counsel, U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander, RTN, 2011 to 2013. Taylor Sexton, Principal Senior Advisor to the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, ASPR, at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 2020 to 2021. Holland and Hart, registered April 2025. Andrew Wheeler, Partner and Head of Federal Affairs, Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Trump's first term, 2019 to 2021. He served as Acting Administrator of EPA in 2018 and 2019, and prior to that as Deputy Administrator from April to July 2018. Troy Lyons, Senior Director of Federal Affairs, Associate Administrator for the EPA Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations, 2017 to 2019, and EPA Senior Advisor to the Administrator for External Affairs, 2019, serving under EPA Administrators Wheeler and Scott Pruitt. He was EPA's Chief Liaison to Congress, the White House, and state governments, and he managed the confirmation process for EPA nominees in Trump's first term. Jennifer Schiller-Newman, of Counsel, served for over 20 years and held every leadership rank within the appellate section of the Environment and Natural Resources Division, ENDR, in the U.S. Department of Justice, most recently as Chief in charge of directing litigation and appeals involving nearly every major environmental and natural resources statute and representing a broad range of federal agencies. She departed the DOJ in May 2025 and joined Holland and Hart. Amelia Yoel, of Counsel, Appellate Attorney in the Environment and Natural Resources Division, ENRD, in the U.S. Department of Justice, 2019 to 2025. Invariant. Ken Barbick, Principal, Food and Agriculture Practice Group, Assistant Secretary for Congressional Relations at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 2018 to 2021. Ann Macmillan, Chief Strategy Officer, Deputy Chief of Staff to USDA Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, and Senior Policy Advisor to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, DCA. Amy Swanger, Principal, Director of Legislative Affairs and Assistant to the President, White House, 2020 to 2021. Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs and Deputy Assistant to the President, 2017 to 2020. Jordan Bonfitto, Director, Senior Advisor to Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins and Chief of Staff for USDA's Marketing and Regulatory Programs, February to October 2025. During the first Trump administration, he held senior roles at USDA and the White House National Economic Council. Morgan Vina, Principal, Chief of Staff for International Security Affairs at the Department of Defense, 2019 to 2021. Chief of Staff to Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki R. Haley, 2017 to 2019. U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations Advisor to then Chairman Bob Corker, R.T.N. Capitol Counsel. John Martin, Partner and Head of Healthcare Practice, Principal Associate Commissioner for Legislation at the FDA under Commissioner Scott Gottlieb. Previously served as Legislative Director for Senator Tom Cotton, R.A.R., Senior Health Policy Advisor for Governor Asa Hutchinson, R.A.R., and Political Director for Tommy Thompson for Senate. David Olander, Partner and Tax Practice Lead. He was the Majority Chief Tax Counsel to the House Ways and Means Committee under Chairman Dave Camp, R.M.I. Tax and Policy Counsel for Representative Thomas Reynolds, R.N.Y. Clint Robinson, Partner, appointed by former President George W. Bush to the role of Associate Administrator of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs of the U.S. General Services Administration, GSA, and served as Senior Staff to House Republican leadership. Shannon Finley, Founding Partner, Senior Advisor and Political Consultant to Senator Max Baucus, D.M.T., for 8 years. Finance Director to the Baucus 2002 re-election campaign and Director of his PAC. Jeffrey Carroll, Partner, Staff Director for the House Energy and Commerce Committee under Chairman Frank Pallone, Jr., D.N.J., also served as Chief of Staff for Representative Pallone, Jr. and managed his campaign to become the senior Democrat on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Former Senator Pat Roberts, Partner, former Senator and Congressman from Kansas. He is the only person in U.S. history to have chaired both the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. George Sifakis, Partner, Assistant to the President and Director of the Office of Public Liaison, 2017. Served on the Presidential Transition Team in 2016 and 2000. Worked as advanced staff for former President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush. Phil Hardy, Partner, served on the committee to elect the president during the 2016 Trump campaign. Communications Director and District Coalitions Director for Representative Paul Labrador, RID, and worked as Communications Director and Policy Advisor for Lieutenant Governor Brad Little, RID. BGR Government Affairs. Brent Delmont, Principal and Head of Health and Life Sciences, Vice President for Federal Government Relations at the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, BIO, the biotech industry's main trade group for 10 years. FDA Counsel at the House Committee on Energy and Commerce under Chairman Tom Bliley, RBA, and Billy Tazin, RLA. Remy Brim, Ph.D., Principal and Head of Health and Life Sciences, Senior FDA Policy Advisor to the Senate Health Committee Ranking Member Patty Murray, DWA. Health Policy Advisor to Senator Elizabeth Warren, DMA, from 2013 to 2016. John Stone, Principal, FDA and Public Health, House Energy and Commerce Committee staff for nearly 7 years, first as a counsel on the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee and then Senior Counsel on the Health Subcommittee, 2011 to 2017. Worked for Chairman Fred Upton, RMI, for 7 years. Joel Bailey, Vice President, Chief of Staff to Representative Jimmy Panetta, DCA, until 2021. Prior to this role, Bailey spent over a decade working in various congressional offices. David Urban, Managing Director, Senior Advisor to the 2016, 2020, and 2024 Trump campaigns. Appointed by Trump to serve as the 11th Chairman of the American Battle Monuments Commission and as a trustee to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Chief of Staff to Senator Arlen Specter, RPA, from 1997 to 2002. William Crozer, Practice Head and Principal, Special Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, 2018 to 2021. Before joining Trump's White House, he was a vice president at BGR Group, 2013 to 2018. He previously served in Governor Nathan Deal's RGA, Office of the Executive Council, and was a major donor club director for the Republican National Committee, 2007 to 2009. Joseph Lai, Principal, served in the White House as Special Assistant to the President for Legislative Affairs, 2017 to 2019. He was a key White House liaison to the Senate, leading the outreach and vote-counting efforts to confirm Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, as well as appointees to the Federal Reserve and the Cabinet. He also helped pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the USMCA trade agreement. Kirsten Madison, Senior Vice President, Assistant Secretary of State for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, 2018 to 2021. She has also held many other advisory roles for government leaders for 20 years. Aiken Gumstraws Hauer and Feld. Lynn Tjeerdsma, Consultant, 2 decades as a top advisor to Senator, now Majority Leader, John Thune, RSD. Assistant Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 2008 to 2011. David Schwietert, Senior Policy Advisor, spent over 15 years as a primary aide for Senator, now Majority Leader, John Thune, RSD. Legislative Director for Thune, 2006 to 2013. Staff Director for the Senate Commerce Committee during Thune's tenure as Chair and Ranking Member, 2013 to 2015. Jeff Verhoff, Senior Advisor, served on the Trump-Pence Victory Finance Leadership Committee 2017 to 2021 and was the Vice Chair of the RNC Finance Committee in those years. Previously worked for Senator William Roth Jr., RDE, during Roth's tenure as Chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Kelly Ann Shaw, Partner, Deputy Assistant to the President for International Economic Affairs and the U.S. Lead Negotiator, Sherpa, for the G7, G20, and APEC, 2018 to 2019. Prior to the White House, she was Republican Trade Counsel to the House Committee on Ways and Means Committee and Assistant General Counsel for the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Anna Abram, Senior Advisor, Deputy Commissioner for Policy, Legislation, and International Affairs at the FDA, 2017 to 2021. Health and Policy Director and Senior Advisor to Senator Richard Burr, RNC, and worked at the Senate Help Committee, 2009 to 2017. Associate Director at the White House Domestic Policy Council, 2007 to 2009. The Russell Group. Randy Russell, President and CEO, widely recognized as one of D.C.'s most influential agricultural lobbyists, with decades of experience in key agricultural positions including Chief of Staff for Secretary of Agriculture John Block, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economics at the USDA, and 1981 Farm Bill Coordinator. He was the architect of the Coalition for Safe and Affordable Food, an industry front group that opposed labels on GMO food, and he led the industry effort to pass the National Disclosure Standard, DARK Act, that preempted Vermont's GMO labeling law. Andrew Harker, Principal. Harker managed the Coalition for Safe Affordable Food, an industry front group that opposed labels on genetically engineered foods. Ashley Johnson, Principal, served on the Senate Agriculture Committee under Senator Blanche Lincoln, DAR, and staffer to former Representative Mike Ross, DAR. Joined the Obama administration in 2011 and held multiple roles at USDA, including White House Liaison, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary and Policy Assistant for the White House Domestic Policy Council. Jessica Shulkin, Chief Advocacy and External Affairs Officer, Professional Staff Member for the Senate Appropriations Committee on the Agriculture Subcommittee and later staff director, 2001 to 2012. Worked for Sens Herb Cole, TWI, David Pryor, TAR, Jeff Merkley, Dior, Robert Byrd, TWV, Daniel Inouye, THI, Barbara Mikulski, DMD, and Patrick Leedy, DVT. HP Strategies. Greg Hartley, co-founder, Chief Operating Office, Executive Vice Chairman, recognized as one of the top hired guns in Washington by the Hill newspaper. Staffer and advisor for 18 years to Representative Roy Blunt, RMO, former House Republican Whip and Senator. Eric Lawson, Director, Managing Principal, Congressional staffer for 16 years, most recently as Chief of Staff to Representative Daniel Lipinski, TIL. Washington Tax and Public Policy Group. James Max Pedrati. As a campaign operative for the South Carolina Republican Party, he worked on election campaigns for Trump and Senator Lindsey Graham, RSC. Deputy Chief of Staff, Legislative Director, and Senior Assistant roles to Representative Carol Miller, RWV, 2021 to 2023. Greg Nickerson, Staff Director for Representative Jim McCrary, RLA, and Tax Counsel to Representative Bill Thomas, RCA, and on the House Ways and Means Committee, 2001 to 2005. Zach Price, Staff Assistant to Senator Dan Coates, RN, 2016 to 2017. The Peterson Group. Colin Peterson, President and Founder, Congressman, DMN, from 1991 to 2021, and Chairman and Ranking Member of the House Agriculture Committee from 2005 to 2021. Elliot Peterson, Director of Government Affairs, Treasurer, Election Compliance Manager, and Off-Year Campaign Manager for Representative Colin Peterson's re-election campaigns from 1999 to 2021, and fundraiser and campaign staffer for his father's campaigns from 1989 to 1992. Allison Stock, Vice President, Communication and Public Affairs, Representative Colin Peterson's Chief of Staff from 2015 to 2021 and former Communications Director. She directed Peterson's campaigns for Congress 5 times. Bayer in-house lobbyists. Michael Holland, Director, Government Affairs, Legislative Counsel from 2009 to 2011 to Representative Devin Nunes, RCA, the current CEO of Trump Media and Technology Group. Michael Parrish, VP, Public Affairs, Science and Sustainability. Parrish has more than 20 years' experience in key government positions, including multiple roles at the Department of Justice and the State Department, and as advisor and executive assistant to Representative Sam Fair, DCA. Stephanie Murphy, Senior Director, Corporate and International Government Affairs. She served as the Director of Agricultural Affairs at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, under Obama. Eric Lutt, Director, Federal Government Affairs. Before Bayer, he spent a decade as a lead policy expert at the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, BIO. James Travis, Senior Director, State Government Affairs. Travis worked at Monsanto for 15 years, since 2003 before joining Bayer. Prior to that role, he was Senior Legislative Assistant for Agriculture and Water Resources for Representative Cal Dooley, DCA. Brian Nagel, Senior Director, Federal Relations and Policy. He previously served as Legislative Director for Sens, Kay Hagen, DNC, and Fritz Hollings, SC.